Hello, I'm Joshua Espinosa, and this is the Reign of Terror and How Terror is Justified. The French Revolution is known as a time of immense radicalism, but within the French Revolution was a small period in which it became too radical, and those in charge became obsessed with defending the revolution that they brought terror upon those they were meant to protect. The National Assembly, which had replaced the Estates General since the largest estate, the Third Estate, which was essentially the Commoners of France, decided to secede from the Estates General and create their own assembly, a body whose purpose was to create a new constitution and ultimately wrote the Declarations of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which would later become the preamble to the French Constitution of 1791. The Declaration was largely based off Enlightenment thinking and stated that the rights of man are held to be universal, valid at all times, in all places, where their rights were natural, unalienable, and sacred. Rights such as the one of freedom of speech and freedom of press were given to all. One idea was the principle of popular sovereignty or rule of the people, in contrast to the divine right of kings, which was being highly questioned at the time. This also promoted social equality among citizens and saw all citizens as equal in the eyes of the law. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens evolved and eventually became the Constitution of 1791 and held many of the same ideas seen in the first document and put limitations on King Louis XVI, such as the veto, which those in National Assembly, such as the radical left Jacobin Party, uh, used to make Louis seem tyrannical by using his vetoes targeting the clergy and emigres, to which Louis vetoed both as expected. On April 20th, 1792, France declared war on Austria and Prussia, beginning the French Revolutionary Wars, but suffered a series of disastrous defeats in an attempt to gain support. The government ordered non-juring priests to swear the oath or be deported, dissolved the Constitutional Guard, and replaced it with 20,000 Ferrerets. Louis agreed to disband the Guard, but vetoed the other two proposals. Conflict between King Louis XVI of France and the country's new revolutionary legislative assembly increased through the spring and summer of 1792 as Louis vetoed radical measures voted upon by the assembly. Tensions accelerated dramatically on August 1st when news reached Paris that the commander of the Allied Prussian and Austrian armies had issued the Brunswick Manifesto, threatening unforgettable vengeance on Paris should harm be done to the French monarchy. On August 10th, the National Guard of Paris Commune, the Ferrerets from Marseille and Brittany, stormed the king's residence in Tuileries Palace in Paris, which was defended by Swiss guards. Hundreds of Swiss were killed in the battle, and Louis and the royal family took shelter with the Legislative Assembly, with them deciding to relieve the king of his duties. The formal end of the monarchy occurred 6 weeks later on September 21st as one of the first acts of the new National Convention, which established a republic on the next day. After the August 10th insurrection and the installment of a republic, conservatives within the National Convention watched in horror as they were outvoted 361 to 288 to execute the former king, and will call for end of revolutionary France by leaving Paris and heading to the provinces and caused revolts in Bordeaux, Lyon, Toulon, Marseille, and Caen. The republic seemed on the verge of collapse. This crisis led to the creation on April 6, 1793 of the Committee of Public Safety, an executive committee accountable to the convention. The Reign of Terror began as a way to harness revolutionary fervor, but quickly degenerated into a settlement of personal grievances. At the end of July, the convention set price controls over a wide range of goods with the death penalty for hoarders, and on September 9th, revolutionary groups were established to enforce them. On the 17th, the law of suspects was ordered the arrest of suspected enemies of freedom, initiating what became known as the Terror. According to archival records from 1793 to July 1794, some 16,600 people were executed on charges of counter-revolutionary activity. Another 40,000 may have been summarily executed or died awaiting trial. The Provisional Revolutionary Tribunal was established on August 17, 1792, in response to the storming of the Tuileries, to ensure that there was some appropriate legal process for dealing with suspects accused of political crimes and treason, rather than arbitrary killing by local committees. Maximilien Robespierre proposed that the new tribunal be set up with extraordinary powers to impose the death sentence. Conspiracies against Robespierre, who had dominated the Committee of Public Safety, came together on the 9th Thermidor, 1794. A member of and previously president of the National Convention, went on to denounce the tyranny of Robespierre. On the very next day, Robespierre was executed with 21 of his closest associates, including Francois Henriot, ex-commander of the Parisian National Guard, Jean-Baptiste Fleurot-Lescaut, Mayor of Paris, Georges Canton, Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, and René François Dumas, ex-president of the Revolutionary Tribunal. Although no terror might compare to the Reign of Terror or the Great Terror within the Reign of Terror, an abundance of peoples have felt oppressed and terrorized upon for almost any reason, even how they look or where they're from. Jim Crow laws, such as the notable separate but equal, proved to terrorize millions of African American people throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These individuals were supposed to be seen as equal in the eyes of the law, but were seen as lesser in the eyes of everyone in a society that accepted this behavior. Terrorist organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan struck fear to the black people for attempting to become independent, such as the tragedy of Tulsa's Greenwood District in 1921, in which America's Black Wall Street was burned down, along with 300 African Americans slaughtered at the hands of their white peers. Terrorist organizations exist all over the world, demanding all kinds of ideologies or requests be met, or their opponents should face violent consequences. ISIS is attempting to create a perfect Islamic state in the Middle East for their followers to be free to practice their religion to its fullest. This sounds noble until you look up who ISIS is and what they've done to achieve their goals. All causes seem noble, but we must be noble in achieving our goals and not lead with fear, much like the Reign of Terror produced at its height. In conclusion, I believe that anyone can justify terror today. We see US politicians justifying wars. We see ISIS justifying itself. We see white supremacists justifying themselves. And everybody seems to be right. But everybody also seems to be wrong. The reason I chose this topic was because it's extremely interesting on how one government can cause so much damage upon itself and its people that it meant to protect. One notable difference the Reign of Terror made was that it sort of ended the French Revolution. Not completely, but it pushed the revolution from being too radical to getting back to sort of the middle ground that they were aiming for.